Good morning and welcome to the LNG Marketplace Weekly News Flash. Here is the latest news we have selected for you from all over the media. According to the press release of DEFA, the first stage of DEFA's open competition for submitting an expression of interest for the supply of liquefied natural gas has now been completed. 25 suppliers are eligible for the next stages of bidding and negotiations to supply LNG to DEFA. The press release lists all the participant companies. For the first time, you can find the press release on LinkedIn under the hashtags GasTech, Cyprus, and Natural Gas. According to LNG Energy, the privately held Australian company Western Gas is seeking a partner to help deliver its $3.5 billion mid-scale LNG project offshore Western Australia. Goldman Sachs has been appointed as financial advisor. India's H Energy has announced plans to develop an LNG regasification and reloading terminal at Kakinada, potentially developing the port into an LNG hub to cater to demand on the country's east coast and in neighboring countries. The company has signed a post-service agreement at Kakinada Seaport Ltd, and its longer-term plans include the development of LNG reloading and break bulk facilities. This piece of news we found on Hellenic Shipping News. According to the same website, the commodity trader Gunvor comes up top in Pakistan LNG tender, submitting the lowest bid to supply LNG for 6 cargo delivery slots out of the 10 cargoes sought by Pakistan LNG. DXT Commodities, Vitol, and a unit of PetroChina and Soccer Trading submitted the lowest bids for the remaining 4 delivery slots. Qatar Petroleum subsidiary Qatar Terminal Limited and Fluxys LNG have signed a long-term LNG service agreement for the LNG unloading services at Zeebrugge Terminal. Under the agreement, European customers will have total access to reliable LNG supplies from Qatar for the next 25 years. Qatar is the only gas-producing country with long-term contracts for imports of LNG into northwest Europe. More you can read on Hellenic Shipping News and Tank Terminals. Cameron LNG in Louisiana, operated by Sempra Energy, has declared force majeure to the technical problems at the export terminal, but the impact on volumes was not immediately clear. The export terminal is one of 3 new facilities to come on stream this year, boosting U.S. LNG production and prompting a wave of imports into Europe. This piece of news we found on Reuters. We've also found new exciting news from the financial part of LNG trade, and a lot is going on. Asian spot prices for LNG tracked a spike in the European gas market, rising for the first time in 3 weeks. Traders quoted various levels for Asian prices as they moved sharply in reaction to developments on European gas market. European prices jumped on a requirement for Russian producer Gazprom to cut gas flows via the Opal pipeline into Germany. An announcement of problems with at least 5 French nuclear reactors and news of the Dutch Groningen gas field halting production 8 years earlier than initially planned. The October contract on the Dutch market, a benchmark for LNG arriving in Europe, has risen by more than $1 since the end of last week. More you can read on Reuters. Total Holdings has completed an $800 million deal to take over Toshiba Corp's stake in the Freeport LNG liquefaction export facility in Texas, LNG Energy reports. That deal will commence upon commercial operation of Train 3 at Freeport LNG, perhaps in May 2020. Total would be the newest addition to Freeport's LNG suite of world-class liquefaction customers. Asian buyers are negotiating some of the world's cheapest long-term LNG contracts to date amid a supply glut that has depressed spot prices below half the cost of legacy contracts. The turnaround that has occurred as an expansion in global supplies, particularly from projects in the US and Australia, has outpaced disappointing Asian demand growth. More on montelnews.com. Qatar Petroleum has shortlisted several big oil firms willing to buy a stake in Qatar's mega project to expand its LNG export capacity and will look at what the majors could offer in exchange for a piece of the project. Qatar has announced plans to increase its LNG production capacity by 43% in competing with Australia and the United States over the next few years for the world's top LNG exporter title. The new export capacity includes expansion projects set to be completed in 2024. This piece of news we found on oilprice.com. Royal Vopak bought a 49% stake in Colombia's LNG import facility in Cartagena. The company did not disclose how much it paid for the holding. The remaining 51% in Sociedad Portuaria El Cayo, SPEC, is held by privately held Promigas. This is another growth step in LNG portfolio of Vopak, as we read on energyvoice.com. According to MarineLink, Sovcomflot and NYK Line signed a new $176 million non-recourse credit facility for 8 years with 3 leading international banks. The facility will be used towards refinancing 2 ice-class LNG carriers serving the Sakhalin-2 project, Grand Aniva and her sister ship Grand Elena. That's it for this week. Tune in next week for more news, and until then, thanks for tuning in.